Welcome to the debate. We are diving into a really fascinating piece of ancient literature today, the Secrets of Enoch, often called 2 Enoch. Now, for context, this is a profound text. It's usually categorized as pseudepigraphic, so it's attributed to the famous Enoch, but likely written much later, and it details his legendary ascent through multiple heavens. The material is just packed with revelation, and that richness, it kind of forces us to ask a pretty fundamental question about what the text is ultimately trying to do.
Exactly. And we're really debating let's say, the central function of this whole elaborate celestial journey. On the one hand, you've got the argument that Enoch's trip is primarily intended to establish and, quantify the physical, the mathematical order of the cosmos, providing what amounts to aim supreme, a meticulously detailed guide to divine architecture.
And my position, it affirms that. I really believe the text prioritizes the revelation of the Creator's meticulous architecture, the exact mechanics of the universe. This feels like a deliberate, systematic attempt to affirm Enoch as the supreme scribe of cosmic knowledge, focusing on how the universe actually works.
I come at it from a slightly different angle. I'd argue that all that really complex cosmology, it's fundamentally secondary. It functions mainly as this indispensable authoritative framework, right? Designed to underscore the, frankly, terrifying power of the ultimate judge. It lends this incontrovertible weight to the extensive moral and eschatological commands. The instructions needed for salvation and judgment at the end of days. Basically, the science serves the sermon.
Okay, but the evidence for the primacy of cosmic order seems woven right into the identity given to Enoch himself. He isn't just some prophet relaying commands. God explicitly instructs him to measure and describe all things, designating him the writer of all his creation, visible and invisible. Now, that goes way beyond simple moral instruction. It's more like a commission for systematic documentation. And we see this commitment to precision, especially in the astronomical sections. For instance, the text provides just extraordinary mathematical detail about time. It precisely calculates the sun's circuit, get this, to last 28 years. And it compares the lunar year, 354 days, against the solar year, 365 and a quarter days, explicitly identifying that precise 12-day difference. Now, this wasn't just, idle arithmetic. This difference was actually a major point of religious friction in calendrical disputes among Second Temple groups back then.
Why include the really complex technical calculation of the moon's sevenfold course in 19 years? Unless the core revelation is the measurement of time and the systematic mechanics of creation itself.
Okay, your focus on calculation is strong, I grant you that, but I think it kind of overlooks the obvious structural function of that knowledge. While yes, Enoch is designated the writer of creation, the evidence seems to show that this writing is functionally a divine ledger, used primarily for recording human sin, which makes him less a scientist and maybe more an auditor for Judgment Day. The purpose of all this precision, then, is to establish divine omnipresence and perfect judicial accuracy. The entire output, these 366 books of cosmic data, is ultimately handed down to humanity. So, and this is a quote, "They will know me for the creator of all things and will understand how there is no other God but me," which leads directly to obedience and submission, right? When Enoch describes his journey, the most visceral and detailed passages are consistently reserved for the ultimate moral outcomes. The reward in paradise and that horrific place prepared for sinners, hell.
But those are, fairly standard apocalyptic tropes, aren't they? Let's get back to what makes this text unique. God tells Enoch secrets that apparently not even the highest angels know. Specifically, the genesis of creation from non-being through these primal generative entities like Adoil and Archos. Adoil is described as the light that sprung from God's command, and Archos is this sort of redemptive fire. This is a profound, pretty innovative creation mythology, defining how God actually built the universe, moving from absolute void to structured matter. That sounds like theological architecture to me, not just moralizing.
That's a compelling point about theological innovation, definitely.
But have you considered that the innovation itself might be designed purely to enhance the creator's authority? I mean, hell is described so graphically with cruel darkness and unillumined gloom, murky fire, and this impossible mix of frost and ice. It's chaotic, right? The absolute antithesis of the cosmic order you're championing. And it's specifically prepared for those who practice certain sins like child corruption, magic making, stealing, and murder.
Right, those specific sins.
Exactly. And the practical instructions Enoch gives his children when he returns, they aren't about orbital mechanics. They concern moral conduct, charity, helping the injured and condemned, honesty. The measurement of man, ultimately, is based entirely on righteousness, where every weight, every measure, and every make-weight will be as in the market on Judgment Day. That sounds pretty judicial. The cosmic structure, in this view, merely confirms the absolute authority of the judge, who can meticulously observe all human works, writing down, as it says, all works of every man before his creation.
I see why you emphasize the moral culmination, I do. But the moral instructions, while obviously critical for the audience, they feel quite common to many contemporary texts of that period. The real intellectual depth, the complexity that really sets 2 Enoch apart, seems to lie in the cosmological mechanism. I mean, why bother to describe the specific movements of the phoenixes and chalkudri, these bizarre, cosmic bird-like beings that carry the sun on its circuit? Or provide the exact size of the sun's gates down to 61 stadia and a quarter. A stadia is what? An ancient Greek unit, maybe 600 feet? We're talking about divine engineering described so precisely that the author felt compelled to give measurements in fractional ancient units. That feels like more than just setting a stage.
I'd actually disagree completely there. I think the very existence of those hyper-specific details serves a much darker, more functional purpose. This level of detail, this hyper-detail, ensures the listener believes that the judge who commands morality is also the meticulous architect of the cosmos. That precision is deployed as an instrument of divine terror and authority, not, scholarly inquiry for its own sake. Enoch is instructed to measure the depth from Earth downwards to the very lowest hell. That measurement isn't geometry for its own sake. It's quantifying the absolute inescapable boundary of punishment. The cosmic measuring stick is literally applied to the abyss.
But the sheer breadth of the documentation suggests an almost encyclopedic mission. Enoch is documenting the road of the thunder, the measure of the lightning's chain, the precise inventory of the treasure houses of the cold. This isn't just about judgment looming. This feels like an attempt to capture the complete inventory and like the operational manual of the divine mechanism. Describing these unseen, complex natural forces affirms that the primary revelation is one of, intellectual mastery over how creation actually works.
And yet, this systematic cataloging of cosmic time counting years, months, hours is explicitly designed, the text says, so that man might reflect on time and count years, and reflect on his sin and write his work bad and good. The purpose of measuring cosmic time is ultimately the measuring of human life before judgment. Think about it. If you're documenting the exact movements of the sun's gates, you're quantifying the passage of time granted to humanity. And that finite precision only increases the terror when facing eternal judgment. The science becomes the unavoidable countdown to the sermon. And furthermore, look at the narrative structure of 2 Enoch itself. It dictates the priority towards judgment, I think. The text moves from this cosmological wonder directly towards a singular moral culmination. Enoch is restored to Earth for just a brief 30 days, solely to deliver the books and admonish his sons. His mission isn't to, start a school of astronomy. He's there to deliver the final moral decree. Keep your hearts from every injustice and walk before his face with terror and trembling. The ultimate blessed state, it's characterized not by knowing the heavens or measuring the solar course, but by the absence of labor, sickness, and night in the great aeon for the righteous. This final practical instruction feels like the capstone, suggesting the whole cosmological tour was merely to establish the authority, the sheer weight of this final moral decree.
Okay, I'm not entirely convinced by that line of reasoning, because the moral exhortation feels directly tied to the cosmological revelation, but in a truly architectural way. The text establishes the structure of man before it establishes the moral law. The very nature of man's creation is described as being composed of 7 specific consistencies. Flesh from earth, blood from dew, eyes from the sun, intelligence from angels, and so on.
Right, meaning man is this fragile composite being made of bits of everything.
Precisely, but that fragility is divinely engineered. The Creator reveals this profound architectural composition, establishing man as a kind of miniature cosmos derived from all these elements, before giving the moral law. This seems foundational. Enoch isn't just a prophet, he's the designated celestial chronicler, who wrote down the mechanics of the wind, the lightning, the snow, even the number of angels. The morality isn't just some general ethical code dropped in at the end. It feels like the natural, maybe inevitable application of the cosmic order itself. The moral laws are simply the rules of operation for this specifically engineered creature we call man, who has to maintain harmony with the structure from which he was built. Violate the moral law, and you're essentially violating your own cosmic composition.
But doesn't that interpretation risk elevating intellectual knowledge like above submission, which seems to run contrary to the whole apocalyptic tradition? While man's composition is certainly tied to the cosmos in the text, the immediate threat, and therefore the primary concern presented, isn't cosmic misalignment, it's judicial failure. If Enoch were truly meant to be the master cartographer for all time, why are the books he brings back explicitly used for instruction on avoiding sin and achieving eternal life? The knowledge of Archas and Adoyle, fascinating as it is, seems necessary only because it proves the Creator's immense power, which in turn proves the inevitability and the perfection of his judgment. The text's emotional and literary climax feels like the fate of the soul, not the precise size of the sun's gate.
I would argue, though, that the fate of the soul is inseparable from the meticulous order of the cosmos presented here. The Creator establishes himself as the ultimate engineer, and the text's unique identity, I think, lies in this detailed unveiling of the machinery. This focus legitimizes the entire narrative, positioning Enoch as the sole recipient of the operating secrets of the universe. And perhaps that very knowledge is the ultimate source of terror. The true inheritance passed down to his sons isn't really the knowledge of the stars themselves, but the instructions for eternal life. And those instructions are grounded in the terrifying certainty that the meticulous Creator, the one who measured the sun's fractional gates, remember, has already recorded every human deed and prepared the scales for the great judgment with perfect, absolute precision.
The tension here between just the incredible empirical detail, the numbers, the units, these exotic creatures, and the sweeping moral imperatives is genuinely the most challenging aspect of interpreting 2 Enoch. It really leaves us with the question of whether Enoch is primarily a celestial scientist or a judicial messenger preparing humanity for the end.
It certainly illustrates the text's dual function, doesn't it? Urging the reader to consider how cosmic order and human conduct are just inextricably linked in this really profound apocalyptic vision. You probably can't fully understand one function without appreciating the authority that's established by the other.